For decades, having a symphony or a great art gallery was considered a luxurious byproduct of prosperity. But a new study by the Bureau of Business and Economic Research argues that arts and culture are preconditions for economic development because they establish an innovative and entrepreneurial environment and help companies recruit and develop a skilled workforce. The report shows that arts and culture are big business here in New Mexico. And get this, paying nearly $1.4 billion in wages and employing 43,000 New Mexicans. That's on a par with the construction industry and more than the manufacturing sector, but the report also says the state is not capitalizing on its cultural assets. And NMIF producer Megan Kermick asked a group of experts why that's true and what it would take to change that reality.
Joining me today is Jeff Mitchell, Senior Research Scientist with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research, or BEBR. Also, we have Loie Fecteau. She's Director of New Mexico Arts. It's a division of the Department of Cultural Affairs. And Alice Loy. She is co-founder of the Global Center on Cultural Entrepreneurship and also the Director of Programs for a new accelerator called Creative Startups. And Jim Spadaccini, he is the CEO of Ideum. It's a creative firm based in Corrales that develops commercial software, multi-touch hardware, and does a lot of work for museums and other companies around the world. Thank you all for coming to talk with us. Jeff, I want to start with you briefly. Just tell us a little bit what BEBR is. It's at the University of New Mexico.
BEBR is a research institute at UNM that focuses on economic development issues. We do economic forecasts, we do industry studies, we've done a lot of work on arts and culture.
Okay. And as you rolled out the findings of this study in the last few weeks in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, you said there's a window of opportunity right now to leverage our creative and cultural assets, but we are not seizing the moment. So what do you mean?
Creative economy right now is exploding. Communities all over the country and all over the world are investing aggressively. And New Mexico has a great deal of assets, core assets in this area, but we're not backing them up with the sort of business financial infrastructure that's necessary for them to succeed. As this industry takes shape over the next few years, I think patterns will be put in place, and New Mexico has to get engaged in establishing itself within that developing industry.
One of the most intriguing arguments in your study is that you say the arts and culture are not a nice little luxury. They are a precondition of prosperity and economic development.
Right.
Why?
At this point, the economy is so driven by ideas and innovation, and arts and culture become sort of foster an environment of innovation and creativity. Equally, it is a critical drawing point for talented labor in order to get the types of people in the community that you're going to sort of drive innovation and creativity. Arts and culture is a principal asset.
Loie, I want to turn to you. The study was commissioned by the Department of Cultural Affairs. Why did DCA want to look at the economic impact of arts and culture?
Well, I think a lot of credit goes to our Cabinet Secretary, Veronica Gonzalez, who leading up to this study had held a series of community engagement meetings around our state. And we also realized that arts and culture aren't necessarily taken seriously as the economic drivers we think they are in New Mexico. And we had done some work with BEBR through the arts and cultural districts, but also BEBR had been a real leader doing a creative economy study for Santa Fe, city of Bernalillo, or county of Bernalillo, and then a number of Main Street communities around the state. So they're very credible, well respected, and we just thought it was time. And there was a real need for it, and we're hoping that this will sort of act as a catalyst to get everybody's attention, because I do think Jeff is right. We're at a real crossroads here. There's an opportunity to seize this moment, and we have such wonderful assets. I mean, we have the largest state-run museum system in the country. We're the state arts agency, and we fund nonprofits around the state. We put public art around the state, and we just have so much natural beauty and talent, and yet many of the pieces aren't together. So we think we have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle here, but we need to find ways to sort of nudge them to this next step and really capitalize on this high-tech design and some of the high-paying jobs of this industry.
What are the biggest challenges the study found?
Well, a lot of it is, I think Jeff identifies that New Mexico is really a small pond, and maybe even a series of small ponds. There's some isolation. One of the challenges we face as a state is we're the 5th largest in geographic size. That alone is a challenge. However, we live in this world of handheld devices where anybody, you really can work anywhere now, though New Mexico has a challenge because we're not completely wired, so that would be, so for our artists to sort of seize these markets around the world. And a lot of people are working in isolation, sometimes by choice, but also just sometimes lacking a community. And so at Department of Cultural Affairs, we're hoping to foster more collaborations and sort of some of the work that Alice and Tom Augustin are doing through their startup. Westcor is an important partner with these incubators, but there's no real cohesion at this point.
So Alice, going to you, she mentioned you and Tom Augustin. You started the Center on Global, the Center on Global Cultural Entrepreneurship in Santa Fe, and now you're doing this new accelerator called Creative Startups in Albuquerque. What are these, and how do they fit into this picture?
Sure.
In the report?
So we started the center about 8 years ago, recognizing that New Mexico was particularly strong in culture and arts and creativity in general, but that there were relatively few resources for entrepreneurs working in that realm. And recently we began to partner with an organization based here at the University of New Mexico called EPSCoR. And with them we received funding from the National Science Foundation to launch Creative Startups, which is in the country the first accelerator that is dedicated entirely to creative entrepreneurs. And creative entrepreneurs are sort of leading the way for what I see in Jeff's report is the intellectual property, creative technology, artistic expression. I think Jim's company is a really fine example of that. And here in New Mexico, we could be really building a lot of capacity around that and economic opportunity. And our vision for Creative Startups is that it spearhead those efforts and serve as a catalyst for that kind of development.
You said part of this grant was from the National Science Foundation?
Yep.
So there's funding something that's more about creative cultural entrepreneurs.
Well, when you think about it, creativity and the jobs in the creative economy are really jobs that come from human imagination. And the scientific process is an imaginative process. We come across discoveries as humans through, now we use science as a rigorous process to evaluate those discoveries. And that opens doors to innovations and further creativity and new technologies and improved communication. But the National Science Foundation understands, I think, that innovation and creativity are all a part of that human process. And so understanding both how creativity works and what the interplay with economic opportunity is very important. The other piece is that we are attracting a lot of entrepreneurs who are not male and who are not white. And that's really exciting for us because historically the startup environment has been dominated by white men. And I think for us to be competitive as a nation, we need a more diverse set of entrepreneurs actively building businesses, working with investors, building new products that reach new markets.
That's really interesting. I didn't know you were going to, even though you are a white man.
Yeah, and I'm an entrepreneur.
But you have this really interesting company, Ideum, and it's growing rapidly. And your website says you're a creative company. It's part of your brand. So what do you do? Well, and why is being creative important?
Well, I mean, I think it's more than our brand. I mean, it's really part of our company culture. And there's a lot of things that we do that are highly technical, but I think we try to make sure that everything we do is design driven. Mm-hmm. And I think if any kind of theme kind of been cutting through all of this, it's the idea that arts and culture along with science, technology, that weaving these things together is really how you can create value. And so whether we're creating a product like a multi-touch table or we're doing creative services like creating software for a museum installation, in all of those cases it's really a question of finding that balance between something that's technically performs well, that aesthetically looks great, that has that sort of balance, and that culturally, is in tune with what what the message is, what you're trying to convey. So I think that winds up being very, very important to what we do. So we put that forward because that's something that we believe deeply, and we want to make sure that, that's something that's conveyed not just to the outside, but within our company culture as well.
How many employees do you have now? I know you're growing, but how do you find these people?
Well, we have 30 employees. We're always looking for talent, and we've been able to find most of our talent within the state, and that's it's been an ongoing process really since the company began here 7 years ago.
What is the, I mean, these people could probably work anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for them, there's a draw. The draw is the quality of life. It's the beautiful landscape we have. It's the cultural diversity that we have here in New Mexico. So it's
they can afford a house.
They can afford a house in their 20s. I mean, a lot of our employees are pretty young. I think the other part is that I find interesting is that we have several employees who have left the state because they weren't able to find the types of work that they wanted, and then found out about us and came back.
You came here from the Bay Area, and I love the fact that you came here initially to do a project about Chaco Canyon, which kind of goes to everything we're talking about. But your work is mostly outside New Mexico. You're working with the Smithsonian, with the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, these world-class institutions. Why land in New Mexico, and why stay here?
Well, there was a realization several years ago that we could kind of be wherever we wanted. And ultimately, we came to New Mexico. I think we were supposed to, we had two trips to Chaco Canyon budgeted for the project, and I think it was on the 5th trip that I had said, oh, could you ever live here? So, we wound up moving down. And, for us, there's actually some significant advantages. One of the things that makes us a little different than a lot of other tech companies is we do manufacturing. So there's a lot of metal work that goes into our products, and we have 2 fabricators in state. So we're selling, a couple $1 million of worth of hardware every year, and all that fabrication happens here. It's certainly easier to do that here than it would be in California. But I do think it's more a question of the quality of life that was really the main driving force for us moving here.
Jeff, in your report, you note that one of our weaknesses is that we're great in cultural goods production and distribution. Wages tend to be lower.
Right.
Not so great in applied intellectual property fields like design, architecture, media.
Exactly.
How do we clone him? Why don't we have more of him? How do we get more of him?
Well, I think it's not just a matter of attracting them from the Bay Area. I think it's a matter of growing them, finding them within the state, and giving them the resources and the support they need to sort of find their way into this business. The problem that we have is that we have so many creative people, but they lack the support necessary. They lack basic business understanding, how to raise money, how to market. They also, as we've mentioned before, tend to work in isolation of one another. And so it's a matter of sort of creating the broader business environment in which these individuals can thrive. And it's not always something as simple as taxes, or it's usually the support that's necessary for somebody to succeed. We're talking about businesses that can begin very small and grow very quickly, but they need support.
What needs to happen?
Well, I think what Alice is doing is spot on. I think that what we need to be doing is creating locally based institutions that can facilitate communication, collaboration, that can provide training, that can, and also reach out beyond Albuquerque and Santa Fe. I think this is a critical point. It's too easy to see Albuquerque and Santa Fe in isolation of the rest of the state. And the rest of the state represents the diversity of New Mexico, and I think that we need to work both ways, both Santa Fe and Albuquerque extending into the rest of the state to provide the support that is necessary, but also for the people in the other parts of the state to sort of expose Albuquerque and Santa Fe to different ways of thinking, different ideas.
Loie, you go all over the state, as you say, and you held these sort of listening sessions with people. What is the impact of these kind of industries in the rural parts of the state?
Well, I think it's huge in rural New Mexico, and even sometimes the tabletop art can be a significant part of families' income. But
the tabletop art?
Yeah, well, you're making your art on a
Oh, okay.
tabletop. Just
Sort
so
of
kitchen,
cottage
yeah,
industry.
cottage industries. And there are some real challenges because I think in Jeff's report he found that for some, particularly Native American families, something like 90% of the families may be getting some of their income from art-related products. But the other challenge is capacity and the sort of business skills. We had a staff member recently who went to Indian Market and came back saying, oh my gosh, most of the artists don't have websites. We need to help them get websites. But then the question is, well, do they make, you know, or if you're only weaving 1 or 2 Navajo rugs a year, or how many pots are you making, can you meet the capacity? So I think there also has to be some realism in terms of what we're seeking. And I see the real opportunity to really promote more of the high-tech growth and maybe even working with our higher education institutions. One program that Department of Cultural Affairs is doing is a cultural technology internship program through Highlands University.
That's interesting.
And some of those students have gone on to work for Jim's company.
Cool.
And so, and you know, I'm University of New Mexico, the Dean of Arts and Science, Kim Pinder, is very interested in this stuff, but I don't know, I think sometimes we just need to do a better job of telling our story. I think we have a lot of the pieces here, we need to do a better job of telling the story, and we just need to work together more.
So I think the last piece that I would add to all of these pieces being challenges that we can address is the need to reach outside of New Mexico for market opportunities and build networks outside of New Mexico, because I think the markets here are small and they may not be indicative of the opportunities that are beyond New Mexico. I also think we don't necessarily have investors here who are playing in those markets and can provide linkages to clients and to growth patterns. But we also have partners outside of New Mexico, and I would venture to say that Jim, having lived in the Bay Area, helped you sort of see other market opportunities, other big vision ways to build your company, even though you're building it here.
And I think in participating in national organizations, so a lot of museum organizations, for example, have led to a lot of different contacts for us. So, I mean, we do over 90% of our business is out of state. Back to some of the other questions, one of the things I thought was interesting was, you know, making that connection between colleges and, like, we're always looking for talent and trying to find the right way to, you know, connect with people from different college programs. There's no real simple or unified way for doing that right now. It's very kind of hit or miss. So I think that would be something that would help. I think the other thing too is that all of this happens within a larger context. And I think one of the areas that the state has to address is, you know, being 50th in education isn't helpful. Having a police department in Albuquerque that has a bad reputation isn't helpful. And you know, we have great police officers, we have great teachers. I think there's a leadership question that's very important.
And I think business leaders in general are concerned about these issues. Sure. I know that when we talk to business leaders, they feel like they hit a ceiling here in terms of the management they can hire here. And people look at moving here and they look at the education system and they say, I don't think I can leave where I'm living now. I would have to put my children into private schools. And that has a very direct economic impact in terms of businesses like Jim's being able to continue to grow.
We are about out of time. I want you, if you all could stick around, we'll continue this discussion on the web. I want to talk about the Creative Industries Conference that you have coming up, and also going to the education questions. You raised some of these in your report as well. So stick around, we'll do more of this on the web.
Great.